Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Back in the studio after a couple of days in Chicago, covering the Netroots Nation big powwow. A couple thousand progressives came together and talked about their issues. And again, I come back to what I always say: progressive policies, extraordinarily popular. Progressive ideas, extremely popular. Progressives, well, sometimes not so much. But the ideas, the policies, the way forward, enjoyed the time there. The hope is that out of that big powwow comes some activism to get people out to vote so that we can do the things that need to get done, the things that Jelly Bucket Joe, Builder Biden's been out there doing. And look, the trip to Chicago and the trip back, always very interesting on the highways and byways of our crumbling infrastructure. And I've made this trip, numerous times over the years. And every time I do, I talk about just how terrible the Indiana Turnpike is. And again, the sign of bad privatization, because if you remember a number of years back, they privatized it, and then I guess it was a Spanish company that fell through. They screwed it up, and try and get it. They're trying. Give them credit. They're trying to do some little this and little of that. And I gotta wonder how much of Biden's infrastructure money is going in to picking up and fixing the screw up of privatization. Again, neoliberalism and Reaganomics and all of the bad policy and the bad ideology that came out of the 80s and 90s, we're having to clean up. And look, and as I've said, Biden is doing the work, and you got to give him credit. So as we're traveling back and forth, there were a lot of orange cones, a lot of construction going on. A lot of things that, need to get, and a lot of places that need to get work on. This is why, again, I go back to Builder Biden, Jelly Bucket Joe doing the work, getting the funding out there. And again, we're in this moment where Republicans showing their true colors. And again, this isn't about, the weird thing is politics used to be about, little infighting, but you still had to go home. You still had to go back to your district and say, yeah, that pothole, yeah, it's still there. Yeah, that turnpike sucks. Yeah, it's still not done. And voters would hold you accountable for the things they could see, for the things that weren't getting done. Because at least in the past, you'd go and you'd yell at your congressman, fix this pothole, and it would get filled. And you felt like, we did something. Our guy is listening, or our gal is listening. Someone is listening. But I look again at the trek home, and not so much. And the reason I bring this up, couple of reasons, to be honest. You got Biden, who's been out there, talking about building infrastructure and pointing it out. And in fact, you can go to the website, invest.gov, and there's a list of projects being done. You can follow along, all of that. But Republicans still in this moment, while taking credit for stuff that they didn't have anything to do with, they're still trying to defund the money that's going to go into the infrastructure that we desperately need. Look, I've spent a couple million miles on these roads. They've needed it for decades. They've needed serious attention for decades. And finally, you got a guy who's saying, we're going to do it. We're finally going to be able to get something accomplished. We're finally going to get something done. And Republicans are doing everything they can do to booger it up. And it's just mind-blowing to me, because at least they can go back to their districts and say, hey, look what's gotten done. Now, granted, we didn't do anything for it, but hey, let's at least take credit for it. But here they are. And what's bothering also, again, to me in this is the fact that Democrats aren't doing enough to really sound the horn of saying, hey, look what we've done. Now, I love this Joe Biden ad because, again, turning what the attack from someone like Marjorie Three Names is into something very positive, to me, kind of a good thing. So a little background. Marjorie Three Names was at the crazy conference over the weekend, the Turning Points USA conference in Florida. Where else? And, given her spiel, it's about socialism. And this is what the Biden folks decided they were going to do with her speech. And I got to tell you, I think it's absolutely brilliant that this is what they've done. Here's Marjorie Three Names giving her little spiel.
Joe Biden had the largest public investment in social infrastructure and environmental programs that is actually finishing what FDR started, that LBJ expanded on, and Joe Biden is attempting to complete. Programs to address education, medical care, urban problems, rural poverty, transportation, Medicare, Medicaid, labor unions. And he still is working on it.
Wow, I gotta tell you, that is phenomenal. Look, here's the thing. I thought Marjorie Three Names was crazy. I thought she was bad. Look, giving credit where credit is due. Props to Biden from Marjorie Three Names. Now, understand, this was a creative editing job, and even the Biden folks will tell you this, because the reality is they're socialists was her line. It's all bad. And a whole bunch of things that she got wrong. Things about I'll get it right. LBJ, things about Biden. Actually said that they both identified as democratic socialists. Neither have ever done that. In fact, I don't even think you had democratic socialists during the LBJ era. She said that both Biden and LBJ were both Senate majority leaders. No. Biden was never the majority leader. But again, facts don't matter. Accuracy in this world doesn't matter, because it got wild applause from the faithful at the Turning Points USA conference of people who are saying, we got to go after those big government programs. And I want Republicans running on what her spiel was. I want the GOP, because remember, Speaker McCarthy came out and said that, Marjorie Three Names is the best and the brightest and, the most conservative of the GOP. She's like a super god in Speaker McCarthy's worldview. I want the Republicans to finally run on Marjorie Three Names' spiel here. Run against Medicare, run against Medicaid, run against feeding hungry children, run against workers getting a fair wage. Do that out loud. Now, this is what they've been doing all along. This is who the Republican Party has always been. She is just dumb enough to say the quiet parts really loudly. Give her credit. She's not afraid to burn down the Republican Party. And what's interesting is you got, people like Senator Lisa Murkowski who's saying, I get, Republicans coming to me all the time. I can't take much more of this. When are we? No, your party's gone. The old school GOP that thought that they were somewhat, sane, that's gone. It's over. It's done. Marjorie Three Names is now the titular head of the Republican Party, and she's going to run against what built this country. She is going to run against ensuring that seniors don't die in poverty. She's going to run against public education. She's going to run against health care for people. She's going to run on the hyper-capitalist, hooray for me, greed is good, screw you platform. That's what her spiel was. And what's interesting, the people in that room at the Turning Points USA powwow, they cheered. Yay! We're going to go get those people. And what's interesting to me It's always been interesting to me. Those people are generally all of us. And, so she went into this whole powwow about, LBJ had the Great Society and Biden has the Build Back Better and he's still working on it. The largest public investment and social infrastructure environmental program that is actually finishing what FDR started and that LBJ expanded on and Biden has attempted to complete. And I listen to that and I ask anyone, you against that? Is that a bad idea? Now she says socialism. We've got a $32 trillion debt, homelessness, inflation. We're losing the dollar. And my mind goes, this is why you don't allow dumb people into Congress. This is why we should not allow the dumbest person in the class to lead. Because understand, the massive deficits we have a lot to do with Republican conservative neoliberal policies. Our trade deficits, the massive tax giveaways we've given away over decades. We've created a billionaire class by saddling the nation with debt. And yet there seems to be a disconnect. There seems to be a disconnect somewhere between Marjorie Trainwreck's ears and the people who are sitting in that room applauding her saying, we're going to stop socialism, without thinking about the public investments that are being made, that were made during the FDR years, the public investments that were made during the LBJ years. Those paid dividends for decades into the future. The investments made under the good socialist President Dwight David Eisenhower, those investments paid dividends for decades. We're still reaping the benefits of those investments. And yet, you got Marjorie three names. You got Marjorie who's just, she can't help herself. She's got to go on and I got to play it again. I do. I've got to have Marjorie in her way. Just lay it out for us. Here's Marjorie three names again.
Joe Biden had the largest public investment in social infrastructure and environmental programs that is actually finishing what FDR started, that LBJ expanded on, and Joe Biden is attempting to complete. Programs to address education, medical care, urban problems, rural poverty, transportation, Medicare, Medicaid, labor unions. And he still is working on it.
And he is still working on it. And hopefully come 2024, well, we're going to keep working on it by not allowing people like Marjorie three names anywhere near the halls of power. Got to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So again, I come back to this, the fact that Marjorie Three Names and Republicans, please run on that platform. We're going to end Social Security because you remember what during the State of the Union, we're not going after Medicare. No, we wouldn't do such a thing. Only we keep saying and telling you and writing and all of that we're going to. We would never. Of course not. And here's the weird thing. Stupid people still buy into it that, no, they wouldn't do it. They said they wouldn't. They're going to. They've always wanted. That's always been on the wet dream list. Let's go to the phone. Got Alice on one. Alice, how are you?
Totally insane, thanks. How about you?
I am good. It's good to be back in the studio. What's on your mind?
What I wanted to say was a couple of things. First of all, Marjorie Three Names is a complete and utter idiot, but then most Republicans are. Number two, did you catch the news and see I'm guessing she must be a MTG wannabe for the Americans for Prosperity that was on the news, running her mouth about being against the infrastructure in Pennsylvania.
Yeah. I caught part of it.
Oh, my God.
What's interesting to me is that they can say this stuff with a straight face and that anyone will take them seriously ever again.
Oh, I know. And she's going on, this woman, the woman when she was going on and on about all this inflation and it's Biden and we want to go back to flood everything with all this energy and lower gas prices and food prices. And I thought, you're just a freaking idiot that doesn't know how anything works, do you, honey? Oh, yeah. But, and last, I was told yesterday by the local evangelical Trumpkins that, did you know, by the way, Rick, because I've not heard any of this, but apparently all the churches are having to lock their doors because all the Christians are getting letters that they're going to be shot up in church. And there's been several churches have been attacked and everybody shot. I must have missed the news.
Wow, as if there wasn't a reason to not go to church before, I maybe spread that rumor. Nobody will go. I guess that's the is that the game? Because I'm trying to figure out the end game in this.
Well, they told me, see how the Christians are persecuted.
Oh, okay.
We're just persecuted.
Yeah, the victim card. Got it.
Yeah, it was the victim card. So I just was like, well, I missed the news. I haven't seen it or heard any of it. But that's my report from my little hamlet. So you have a good evening.
Thanks so much. It's important to have that. No, I mean, look, I've heard the victim card stuff a lot. I've and the Q folks are masters at it. It's hysterical. This Sound of Freedom movie that I haven't seen yet, that I almost have to see, but I don't want to pay for, because I don't want to give these people more money. Crying victimhood while it is the top grossing movie. Everyone's trying to shut us out, but it's making more money than anything else. Everyone's trying to make us, not see the movie, yet it's making more money. And taking little things like, the lights didn't work or the film went out at one point. People who have gone to movies, and this is the thing, if you've ever, maybe this is the problem. Maybe these are people who were never out of the house before and have never gone places, and maybe they don't know how real life works. Maybe this is what it is. Because I've been to movies where in the middle it stops. I've been to movies where the lights got stuck or were off or on, or you name it. The heat didn't work. The air conditioning didn't work. There was a foul odor from the seat behind us. All of these things happen when you're talking about public space. But when you're talking about the Christian folk, it becomes a conspiracy. And this is my problem with the extreme religious, what I say, the people who are pushing Christian Sharia law. Look, I've utmost respect for religious people, the sane, the rational ones, the ones who are off on the deep end, who around every corner see some kind of conspiracy and victimhood and start creating their own narratives. This is where I have a problem. And this is where we all should have a problem. And I didn't want to get into this, but Alice brought it up. over the period while we were in Chicago, you saw some of this stuff going on where the zealots were out and pushing this narrative that's really kind of frightening. And this movie's part of that. This idea of you're going to be a Christian warrior and you're going to take on the establishment individually and you're going to go and single-handedly right the wrongs in the name of God. And you can do this kind of superhero, this kind of, zealot religious superhero. Because they've never really had one of those in the past. They never had the big R on their shirt, religion. And now they're creating that. And, the conversation I had over the weekend was this is how you end up with terrorists doing extreme things like shooting places up. This is how you're going to get, the zealotry that we look at in some of the Muslim communities and go, that's them. I am not painting all of Christianity with the same brush. I'm targeting it at the crazy people, the people who are wearing the Christian warrior t-shirts. The people who want to bring us a hyper-religious set of laws and codes that everyone, regardless of whether you believe or not, have to abide by. This is the scary part of what's happening in this country. And until we push back, the silent majority, the people who have always been tolerant of the extremists, one day we're going to wake up and go, there's no way back. When the Marjorie Three Names of the world, when they take over, we've got real problems. And I don't want to be this kind of doomsday, dark cloud kind of commentator, but we see what happens when desperation and zealotry meet. We see what happens when poverty and struggle meet with this kind of fantasiful thinking of, we're the chosen and our God is bigger than yours and you shall be conquered. And the rhetoric that comes out of all of this, that's what's frightening to me. It's this indoctrination. So the people who are the ones who are out there screaming about they're indoctrinating our kids, they're the ones doing it. This isn't difficult to figure out. This has worked time and time again. So when I see a movie like, I saw the trailer for it, and I got enough of what I think I got enough from that. When you see this Sound of Freedom plot, where there is a true crime, there is truly something wrong that needs to be addressed, but this idea that we're going to have this, these warriors and we're going to do it, and this is dangerous stuff. And as I've said, this is how the you name the terrorist group overseas, this is how they recruit. So my fear is it happens right here. I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Lots going on today. Just a little bit in the news. We'll get to that when we come back. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com if you got something on your mind. Back after this. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1969. That was the day hospital workers in Charleston, South Carolina, won union recognition. The 113-day strike reflected all the broader social issues of the day. Led primarily by black women, the strike at the medical college, Charleston County, and several other hospitals intersected civil rights and racial and gender discrimination on the job. Jewel Charmaine Debnam notes that women like Local 1199B President Mary Moultrie, Naomi Watts, and others were essential to the strike, not only as daily participants on the picket line, but also as leaders of the local movement establishment. For months, strikers marched, walked picket lines, clashed with police, and held vigils demanding their right to organize. They defied injunctions and endured hundreds of arrests, nightly curfews, and confrontations with state National Guard. Governor McNair and the hospital boards had initially refused to concede to the workers' demands for union recognition. They claimed workers paid with public funds could not engage in collective bargaining. But the women were steadfast. They pointed to the wage disparities between black and white workers and between male and female workers. They also protested the blatant disrespect and discrimination meted out daily by management. Local longshoremen stood in solidarity with the strikers and threatened a walkout in support if their demands were not met. Coretta Scott King and many other civil rights leaders also played a supportive role. Finally, the union won reinstatement of fired workers, which had touched off the strike. They also won a solid grievance procedure, a minimum wage, and access to a credit union. Victory would be short-lived, however, when the state almost immediately refused to hold up its end of the agreement. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
All those firecrackers on July 4th got me thinking about the headline revolutionaries who signed the 1776 Declaration, fought the Brits for independence, hammered out the Constitution, and installed our Bill of Rights. Old Ben, Monticello Tom, General George, Alex, pamphleteer Tommy Payne, Jimmy and Dolly, Tea Party Sam, and others got America's democratic experiment started. And they're rightly saluted today from schoolrooms to political gatherings of both major parties as true patriots. Reflecting on that generation's remarkable impact reveals the historic potential of our people's democratic spirit. But it also raises the unavoidable contrast with our present crop of leading political characters. This is worth noting now because the 4th has become the opening bell for America's quadrennial presidential run. Yes, ready or not, the first debates are only a month away, and Iowa's Republican caucuses are set for January 15. So here's my question. Given the current state of our two major parties, would any of the patriots of '76 have a snowball's chance in hell of being nominated for president of the country they founded? Consider George Washington. The GOP's MAGA crowd would boo him off the stage. Trump would mock the general as Toothless George, and the party of QAnon, anti-woke nonsense, and Marjorie Taylor Greene would place him behind uber-rich ego trippers like Vivek Ramaswamy and Doug Burgum. Democrats? While today's grassroots Dems would rally enthusiastically to the little d democratic principles and firebrand activism of Thomas Paine or Samuel Adams, the party's pusillanimous corporate-hugging establishment would bury both in a muddy deluge of money and lies. This is Jim Hightower saying, this political reality shouldn't depress us, but provoke us into demanding and doing better. Maybe greatness is now beyond us, but shouldn't we strive for more than mediocrity and outright goofiness?
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So we got up today to the truth over on Truth Social. And I'm sure a lot of people re-truth the truth of the truth teller. You know, what a joke. But anyway, Donald Trump is truthed out that he's the target. Got a special letter from Jack Smith saying he's the target of a grand jury investigation because, hey, he kind of tried to overthrow the 2020 election, did a couple of things, led to that little, powwow thing where they, defecated on the floor of our Capitol and, did all that stuff. The perfectly fine day of walking between the ropes. You've heard about it. Now, what's interesting to me is you look at all of the indictments that are now rolling in, Republicans still defending poor Donald. I wonder when when that flip happens. But here to share some thoughts on their report, and they've got a great report out today. And I got to wonder if there was some rolling of the dice, some crystal ball kind of thinking, because the folks over at Crew, they've got a new report saying that, Donald Trump should be disqualified because of the 14th Amendment. And that's why I've asked Donald K. Sherman to come talk with us. He's the executive vice president and chief counsel for the folks at Crew, the Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington. You can check out their website, citizensforethics.org. Donald, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me.
So let's start right with this. Why do you think he shouldn't be allowed to run? What precludes him in this moment?
Well, yeah, I mean, everyone knows many of the qualifications and disqualifications for serving as president. You have to be a natural born citizen. You have to be 35 years old. You can't have been elected twice to serve as president or serve 2 terms. Lesser known is codified in Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. It's called the disqualification clause. And it says if you took an oath to defend the Constitution and engaged in an insurrection against it, you are banned or disqualified from serving as a state or federal officer. And sadly, it seems tailor-made for the situation that Donald Trump has once again put us in. He is someone who everybody saw take an oath to defend the Constitution on January 20th, 2017, as an officer of the United States. It is commonly understood, including by Donald Trump's own impeachment lawyers, that January 6th was an insurrection. And it is also commonly understood, including by bipartisan votes in the House and the Senate, the January 6th committee, federal judges appointed by Republicans and Democrats, that Donald Trump was the central cause of the insurrection. This is, not rocket science. It is in many ways, 2 + 2 = 4. Donald Trump is disqualified from serving as a federal officer, as a governor, as president of the United States under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment.
Shouldn't that only be, though, if he's been convicted? I mean, there's a lot of where's the conviction? My right-wing friends would ask. Where's the presumed innocent until proven guilty? Where's that in this report?
Well, I think your right-wing friends might say that there wasn't an insurrection.
Oh, no, they truly believe it was a peaceful day. It was a family day, I was told. It was like a kind of a picnicky atmosphere.
But I will tell you, in the aftermath of the Civil War, the Reconstruction Congress wrestled with this issue and concluded that no criminal conviction was needed to be disqualified from office. Again, it's not a criminal punishment. It just says that you are not eligible to serve, just in the same way that somebody that's 25 years old is ineligible to serve. Funnily enough, just in the same way that the former president suggested that President Obama was not eligible to serve, lying and claiming that he wasn't a natural-born citizen in the United States. It's not a penalty. It's not a punishment. It is a qualification for office, or a disqualification in this instance. So you challenge his eligibility on the ballot, much like lots of people do, much like happens in every election in every state in this country every year that there is an election. And you go to court and you prove by a preponderance of evidence that Donald Trump engaged in insurrection. And under Section 3, that's the end of the story. You don't need a criminal conviction. And we proved that last year when we removed someone from office, Coy Griffin, who founded Cowboys for Trump in New Mexico, and we sued and got him removed from office in a civil case based on his participation in the insurrection. So there is not just precedent that's 150 years old, but there's precedent that is a few months old, confirming that you don't need to be criminally convicted of a crime of insurrection or any crime related to insurrection in order to be removed or disqualified from office.
Yeah, I'm in a weird spot here, Donald, because I'll be honest with you. I don't ever want him anywhere near the White House. I don't think he should be even allowed to take the tour, let alone sit in the Oval Office. But there's still this part of me that goes, he has to be beaten at the ballot box for the good of the country. And for the the good of the future of this country. He has to be beaten soundly at the ballot box, where we as Americans say, you know what, this isn't who we are. But I get the point, and I get what you're saying. I'm still in this place where I think he's got to be beaten at the box.
So I mean, I would point out that he was beaten at the box by some 7 million plus votes, and then he staged an insurrection to overthrow a free and fair election. So the idea that like he needs to be beaten at the ballot box, and that like that happened already, and he was repudiated by the voters. The reason we're in this place and the reason he's disqualified is because he refused to accept the results of a free and fair election, spread lies, recruited people to come to the Capitol and be violent and fight like hell at the Capitol. And we almost lost members of Congress. We almost lost our vice president because of it. The Constitution says you don't get a second chance to do that, right? And again, I think I'm less worried about the next election or the next two elections. I'm more worried about 50, 100 years from now. God forbid we are in this place again. Thankfully, when we looked at the case law, there were examples, numerous examples of people disqualified after the Civil War for engaging in insurrection against this government. I want to make sure that if we are in this place, if our democracy is in this place, long after we are gone, that there is a historical record and legal precedence that Donald Trump was held accountable in this way, and that you can't engage in insurrection and then just submit and then run for president again.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you, Donald. But I over the weekend, I don't know if you saw the quote from Vivek Ramaswamy, who said that, basically January 6th was a friendly preview of what's to come. So I hear what you're saying, but my fear, I keep coming back to this place where the Republicans, and I know you're a nonpartisan group, you're straight down the middle of the group, line group, but I look at the defense of Donald Trump from the Republicans, very few voices coming out and speaking out against him. The justification that somehow we're weaponizing every agency to go after him, and now Ramaswamy saying, hey, that January 6th thing, that was just a friendly preview. Get ready for the main event. I'm in a weird kind of fear pattern. And my concern then comes if we disqualify him, boom, everything explodes. Any thoughts on that?
Well, again, I look at this as someone who questioned the results of an election that he won, right? And then spread lies and misinformation and incited an insurrection in an election that he lost. The idea that we just narrowly missed again.
Yeah.
Members of Congress being attacked and killed on the floor. I mean, you heard those testimonials. You saw video of members cowering in fear. Capitol police officers being crushed by Donald Trump's mob. Members of Congress calling their family and telling them goodbye. The Vice President of the United States of his own party, of his own choosing, being ferried away to a secret location to protect him from Donald Trump's mob. We were we had a razor thin miss here of losing members of our government and losing our entire government. And the idea that we should just shrug our shoulders and hope that this election is the one that Donald Trump actually accepts just doesn't, it passes credulity, right? The idea that we would not use every legal tool in our toolkit to hold him accountable and ensure that this doesn't happen again, not just in 2024 again, but 50, 100 years from now. This is where we have to draw the line, if nowhere else.
No. I mean, the crack pottery that came out of 2020. I mean, the idea that Eastman came up with, and all of the thoughts that were being kicked around the room as possibilities, the possibility of the vice president not certifying an election, and look, the savior of the country being being in the hands of a guy who couldn't spell potato is quite frightening to me. I got to be honest, Donald. When it's I never thought we'd be here. I don't think anyone thought we would be here. And again, we have to remind ourselves, Donald Trump has forced us into this position, right? He forced Mike Pence to stand in the breach, to be the person to finally say no, that I won't overturn this election. He forced Capitol police officers, the law enforcement who were under attack, to hold the line. And he's forcing us, by choosing to run again, despite obviously being disqualified, to draw a line in the sand and say, no, this tool was built for this moment. And if we don't use it here against the former president, then it really can't be used again going forward. And this tool that Congress and the states thought was so important that they amended the Constitution to include, will essentially become inert because we are worried about Donald Trump doing the things that we already know that he's capable of doing. No, you're right. You're right on. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show here with Donald K. Sherman. He's the Executive Vice President and Chief Counsel with CREW, Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington. You can check out their website, citizensforethics.org. We'll get links out on social media. So you've got this idea. You've got this this report out. What are the chances of someone moving on this, and what can we do to help move this forward? Because look, I know a lot of people who don't want him to run for re-election because of the fear that who knows, he might get elected and then pardon himself for all of the crimes that he's committed, even though we're not sure he can do that either. But that I'm sure will not stop him. What are the chances?
Well, look, we know two things happened in the two times that Donald Trump ran for election. The first is he won, and he shredded all our ethical norms and rules and the Constitution. And the second, he lost and incited an insurrection against our government to overturn a free and fair election in violation of the Constitution. Those are the two likeliest outcomes here. You asked, what's the next step? Well, we're going to take legal action as soon as it is legally and strategically viable for us to do so in order to enforce Section 3 against him. Again, we've brought litigation like this before in New Mexico and won the first case in over 150 years using Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, the first case where a court decided as a matter of law that January 6th was an insurrection under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, and we are preparing to do that again. This is a moment where, where people of goodwill have to stand up and use all of the legal tools available to say no. And to ensure that the Constitution is enforced in the way that the drafters of Section 3 intended.
Well, it's going to be interesting, and I'm behind you. I hope the best. I want this to happen. I don't have a lot of faith in our Supreme Court. Because let me ask you that. I mean, do you have much faith in our Supreme Court to make the right call on something like this? Because ultimately, this is where it goes. No.
So I think a couple of things about the Supreme Court. One, they have scrupulously avoided January 6 cases, which suggests to me that they have, except for Thompson v. Trump, where they rejected the appeal and allowed the January 6th committee to get key documents. So I think there's some hope there, but also it's important to remember the Supreme Court itself was under threat in the days leading up to January 6th. And certainly it's likely that they were under threat on January 6th, but also, these justices have life tenure. And so, I think they're insulated from some of the influences that we've seen in other situations. I think they are insulated from with respect to the former president. Yeah. And it seems clear that their tack on January 6th has not followed the same ideological sort of disputes that other issues have. So we are confident that we can bring a case that will win. And we like our chances at the Supreme Court because we believe strongly that the Constitution's on our side.
Good stuff. Donald, I appreciate you taking some time for us. Best of luck. I hope you come back and talk to us again as this continues down the road.
Happily. Thank you so much for calling attention to this.
Appreciate the time. Again, Donald K. Sherman, he's the Executive Director, Executive Vice President, and Chief Counsel over at CREW, Citizens for Ethics in Washington, Responsibility and Ethics in Washington. Citizensforethics.org, the website. We'll get links out on social media. Gonna take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1919. That Friday, thousands of workers in the Chicago stockyards walked off the job. A serious union organizing drive had been underway in the yards since June. One of the organizers of the butchers was John Kikulski. John declared it would be a campaign that included workers who were Polish, Irish, Lithuanian, and in fact, every race, color, creed, and nationality. This was an important pledge because earlier unionization efforts had failed to unite the workforce and had often excluded black workers. Yet the years of racial barriers to unionize proved hard to break down. While 90% of the white workers joined the union, black recruitment lagged behind. Tensions between the newly arriving Eastern European workers and more established white workers also simmered. Despite these setbacks, the stockyard owners were alarmed by the success of the union drive. They sent in 300 mounted policemen to disrupt union meetings and monitor the workers' movements. Angered at the police presence, 10,000 workers walked off the job. They returned to work on Monday, but began organizing for a strike. On July 26th, the workers issued their demands to management for better pay and safer working conditions. The next day would be one of the most infamous days in Chicago history. A group of white Chicagoans stoned and killed a black boy who was swimming and had accidentally drifted into a whites-only part of Lake Michigan. For the next week, a race riot engulfed the neighborhoods surrounding the stockyards. 1,000 black families lost their homes to arson. 23 black and 15 white residents were killed. Any hope of racial unity had been crushed, and as a result, the strike failed. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
So Lauren in Santa Fe sent me an email, a lengthy email. Wow, lots of talking points in there, but the gist of it being that everyone's out to get Trump, all the agencies have been weaponized. It's the same talking points you get, and my response to this is always, look, if it were one thing, and you go, they were going after him for one thing, you go, okay, yeah, you could make the argument that someone was out to get him. You know, it's kind of like, I got a friend who's been married 5 times. And the first time you go, yeah, okay, it was the wife's, it was her fault. Second time you go, okay, maybe it was her fault. Third time, yeah. Fourth time, it's you, buddy. Fifth time, definitely you. There's no conspiracy. It's not all women are out to get you. No, you're an idiot. You're responsible in this. And this is how I see this whole Trump thing. Not everyone's out to get him. He's just done a lot of really dumb, bad stuff. Let's go to the phones. I got Steve in Chicago on line 1. Steve, how you doing today?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. How are you?
Great. Thank you for taking my call. So I wanted to raise a point about this whole question of third parties. And given the impact of someone like Jill Stein in 2016, of Ralph Nader in 2000, Ross Perot in 1992, I mean, these third-party challenges to mainstream politics, I mean, usually they're just a fly, a pimple on the back of our body politic. But in these cases, these are people who literally could have given the election to the other side. I mean, we're talking about predictions going forward as far as 2024 that possibly 150,000 voters will decide those races in key states and the election.
Yep.
And, somebody running on a third-party ticket, be it a Cornell West or what have you, it can just pull away a few tens of thousands of votes, enough to give it to Donald Trump if he is the nominee. And so I am tired of people who are making this argument that, oh, you know what, the Democratic and Republican parties are pretty much the two sides of the same coin. Okay, no, Donald Trump taught us that that's not the case.
Nope.
If you think this country and the Supreme Court would look the same way had Hillary Clinton been the president, then you're delusional. So, it's time that we just stand up to people and say, this is not a political science seminar. This is the real world. You're not going to get everything that you want, but if you allow Donald Trump to win, you're not going to get anything that you want, and we're going to go backwards.
No, you're spot on. And look, I'm not opposed to third-party runs in places where, like Illinois, for instance, where you're a blue state. I like the fact that people are getting out, pushing ideas and issues, and pushing the main parties in directions But when you're talking about Wisconsin, you're talking about Michigan, my state of Pennsylvania, where you're right, a couple of thousand votes one way or another swings an election, and we end up with a George W. Bush, and we end up with all of the things that came out of that. We end up with a Donald Trump. I'm right there with you, Steve.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate the call. No, because here's the thing, and look, you've got the no labels people right now who are saying, no, we're gonna have a Democrat and a Republican run on the same ticket, knowing that they're gonna pull votes away from Democrats. Because those moderate Republicans who moved over to vote for Biden and against Trump, that was the difference in the last election. I know a lot of people have no, young people came out, all those came out. No, it was I always say it's the 5% of the least active, least engaged, least informed voters who decide every election, because they're the ones who flip back and forth. A lot of people are there in their camps. They have their ideology, and it's those undecideds who, well, I'll flip a coin, or he looks better, or whatever the reason for voting is. And this is where these third way, no labels, this is where these groups thrive, because they know they can swing with just a small amount of the electorate. They can swing elections. And I know a lot of my Ralph Nader friends, and I like Ralph Nader. I met him once, good guy, smart guy. But Florida was what Florida was. This is a different country if Al Gore is president. This is a much different country if George W. Bush is not the guy, and all of the things that happened during his 8 years. This is a much different country if you don't have the Bernie bro folks and the people who are like, we're going to burn it all down because I hate Hillary. Look, I was not a Hillary fan, but I knew how bad Donald Trump was going to be. This would be a very different country, very different policies. And this is where I keep coming back to the idea that the working class has to come together and elect good, smart people. And I think Joe Biden in this moment is the best guy. The fact that we are rebuilding our infrastructure, we are reshoring manufacturing. We've got a president who's saying, hey, we should be reunionizing this country. We should be fighting for better wages, hours, conditions, opportunities. Now, look, I think the Republican establishment, the backroom people, I think they know Trump is toast. And they're doing everything that they can to, for instance, one of Trump's ex-cabinet members, Wilbur Ross, former Commerce Secretary, he's pulling together top donors to get Glenn Youngkin in. Youngkin's the scary guy because they think him and his sweater vest are gonna attract a lot of people. There's a $40 million ad buy happening for Tim Scott from a super PAC because, hey, we're gonna put him out there because the moneyed interests on the right don't think Trump is their guy. The problem is they lost control of the people they were outraging. They lost control of the flock. Now, as I understand, only 6 people on the Republican side have qualified for the RNC's upcoming debates. Trump, DeSantis, Nikki Haley, Vivek Ramaswamy, Chris Christie, and Tim Scott. Should be interesting. I'm under the impression Trump is not going to show up. And I got to tell you, if I were him, I wouldn't either. So it'll be interesting to watch them attack each other and go from there. But no, seriously, this is the third way, no labels, all those people, even the Green Party. Look, I love Cornel West. I think it's a huge mistake because you will pull votes away in key areas. And I don't want to wake up the morning after election day going, happened again. We got somebody crazy. Want to hear your thoughts, though? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Are you convinced by the idea that we need to get a bipartisan presidentship, a Democrat and a Republican in office? And then who would be the top of the ticket? That would be the other question. And will Joe Manchin be the guy? Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com.
We're seeing basically the manifestation of decades of inaction.
Extreme heat and floods strike simultaneously across the Northern Hemisphere. Corporate TV news mostly ignores climate change in extreme weather coverage. Plus,
crushing insurance increases now facing Florida homeowners before hurricane season even enters its peak.
Another major insurer ditches Florida in the middle of hurricane season.
All of that bad news for Florida and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
The governor responding to those concerns today about this insurance crisis with what really sounded like a wish upon a star moment.
Did that reporter just use Disney to punch Ron DeSantis in the face?
Why, yes, he did.
Knock on wood, we won't have a big storm this summer.
Knock on wood? This isn't what we should be hearing from our leaders.
Nope, but it's what you're hearing from Ron DeSantis. Knock on wood, this is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, Ron DeSantis is wishing upon a star that there'll be no storms at all down in Florida this year. I'm sure it'll all work out well for him, right?
Yeah, good luck with that. The summer of extremes is still underway. The hottest June on record has been followed by 10 of the hottest days in history in July, with forecasters predicting that 2023 will probably be the hottest year in history.
Probably.
Since records began in the 1850s. Simultaneous heat waves across the northern hemisphere are suffocating the U.S. and parts of Europe and Asia. Concurrent heat waves have increased nearly six-fold in frequency since just the 1980s. Over the weekend, China hit 126 degrees Fahrenheit, a new all-time high national record. Parts of southern Europe are struggling with temperatures approaching 120 degrees. It's so hot.
How hot is it?
That Tour de France cyclists must wear ice vests to prevent heat stroke. The Italian government is warning people to stay out of direct sunlight at the height of tourism season. Parts of the U.S. Southwest, like El Paso, are marking a full month of temperatures above 100 degrees. As we go to air, Phoenix just tied its record for 18 consecutive days of 110-degree temperatures or higher with no end in sight.
Good Lord.
The surge of heat energy is also turbocharging new extreme storms and flash floods. In South Korea, flooding from a month of relentless rains has killed at least 37 people, including motorists trapped in a tunnel by fast-rising floodwaters over the weekend. In the northeastern U.S., sudden extreme cloudbursts triggered new deadly flash floods in North Carolina and in Pennsylvania. This summer of extremes is showing that efforts to adapt are not keeping pace with even the relatively modest levels of human-caused global warming so far. Humanity's use of fossil fuels has warmed the planet 1.2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial times. While computer models accurately predicted the breakneck pace of temperature records we're seeing today, climate scientist Dr. Michael Mann on MSNBC warned that the computer models underestimated some key impacts, like the extent of heat waves and floods.
We're watching our predictions come true. And usually as a scientist, you want to see your predictions come true. But as a climate scientist, you don't. But some of the impacts are exceeding what we predicted. And one of those areas is extreme weather events. Many of these extreme weather events are more extreme, they're more prevalent, more damaging than we expected at this point.
However, on most of the major TV news networks, only about 10% of the coverage of the catastrophic flooding across the Northeast recently mentioned the role of climate change, according to Media Matters. During the analysis period, Fox News mentioned climate change only once, to deny its role in the Vermont floods.
Who could have guessed it?
The researchers say that failure to connect the dots undermines public understanding of how fossil fuel-driven global warming intensifies extreme weather and the urgency of implementing solutions. In other news, yet another major insurer has joined the exodus from Florida. Right in the middle of Atlantic hurricane season, AAA announced it will not renew home and car insurance for some policyholders in Florida, citing increased disaster risk exposure and the skyrocketing costs of reconstruction. It is the fifth major insurer to exit the state.
Well, knock on wood, everything I'm sure will be fine.
FEMA announced its disaster relief fund could run dry at the peak of hurricane season unless Congress shores up funding.
Knock on wood, we won't have a big storm this summer.
And finally, great news in Brazil's Amazon rainforest. After 4 years of rising destruction, new satellite data confirmed confirms that deforestation has dropped in the rainforest by more than a third during the first 6 months of new President Lula's term.
Well, knock on wood, at least there'll be wood to knock on down in Brazil. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks, Twitters, and Mastodons at Green News Report.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I got to tell you, it's a hot summer. It's a lot of my labor friends saying it's a hot strike summer, and there are going to be, I look at my Teamster brothers and sisters at UPS, 340,000 of them. Come a couple of days, they may be walking the picket line. Are my friends at Yellow Freight? They, in a couple of days, may be walking the picket line. We see the folks at SAG-AFTRA. We see the folks at the Writers Guild. Lots of people walking the picket line. And I got a press release today that the flight attendants, 26,000 flight attendants at American Airlines, they're about to authorize a strike. And that's why I've asked Paul Hartshorn to come talk with us. He's the National Communications Chair for the Association of Professional Flight Attendants. They represent those 26,000 flight attendants at American Airlines. Paul, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
So, like I said, this is strike summer. Everywhere I look, there are workers saying, hey, we want better wages, hours, conditions. We want better opportunities. And now I see your 26,000 members are about to take a strike authorization vote. What's got us to this point?
Yeah, it's a hot labor summer, hot strike summer for sure. Look, this is just the next step here in the process. As you know, the transportation workers, flight attendants, pilots, anyone at the airline is governed under Section 6 of the Railway Labor Act. There is a strict process to follow as you go through your way to securing a new contract. Currently, the flight attendants, the 26,000 flight attendants at American Airlines, have filed for and begun federal mediation under the auspices of the National Mediation Board. We started that in March. Talks have been moving, but not moving very quickly, not looking like Americans really in a rush to get to a deal. So the next step for us is a strike authorization vote where we ask our 26,000 members to support us and support the negotiating committee if they feel that we should be released or request to be released from mediation and move into a cooling off period and then a strike. Now,
we learned a lot about the Railway Labor Act during the train talks. What are the chances that a strike, and now this is again well down the road, as you've said, there are steps to get to this. What are the chances a strike on the airlines, especially an airline as large as American, would be allowed to go forward? Any thoughts?
It's concerning. The size of these labor groups at the airlines now, especially after these mega mergers that we've seen for the last 20, 25 years, is concerning, but it doesn't negate the fact that the Railway Labor Act has a process which we must follow, and we also must ask the National Mediation Board for a release. There will come a time where we will reach an impasse if we don't receive a contract, and they will have to release us hopefully into a cooling off period. It's the next step. This strike authorization vote moves us towards that. Look, our union has passed proposals on every section of the contract. We passed a large comprehensive economic proposal in March 7th to be exact. We have not heard back from American Airlines yet. These are 26,000 flight attendants that worked through a pandemic. These are 26,000 flight attendants, I think, that we talked about last time we talked, that have been physically assaulted, had been mass policed for the past 4 years, have seen their staffing on board the aircraft cut because the planes were empty during COVID. Surprisingly, That staffing has not returned now that the passengers and the profits have. So yeah, it's a concern for us about being released. We hope we don't get there. The strike authorization vote is the next step in the process, and we'll keep moving forward. We have to get a contract for these flight attendants. It's been over 4 years since they've seen a pay raise or any quality of life improvements.
4 years since they've gotten a pay raise, and look, with all the inflation that we've had, their wages are based. I guess the question that I have, how does anyone stay?
It's been tough. It's been tough. We've lost a lot of good people. I think that during the COVID, I think we talked about this back in January, we had a lot of people take early outs where they were able to thankfully leave with union negotiated medical care, rather than just leaving when we were overstaffed. And then we saw in June of that 2021 that all of a sudden the passengers came back full force. Very grateful to have people back and feel safe flying again. But we weren't staffed correctly. I mean, anyone can see that. We were not staffed correctly. We were not ready. Any airline, I believe, was ready for the return and the surge of the capacity that came back. So our flight attendants have been through a lot. It's been really difficult 4 years. This contract that we're currently working under became amendable over 4 years ago, at the end of 2018. As in the Railway Labor Act, contracts don't expire, obviously, they become amendable. So it's time. It's time for American Airlines to come to the table. It's time for American Airlines to stop making small moves here and there. It's time for them to respond to our economic proposal so we can get going on this negotiation and give these flight attendants what they deserve. And I will say, you look around, we're not the only airline labor group going through this. It's pilots, it's flight attendants. You name the airline right now. They've been through hell and back. Let's give them a raise. Let's get us back to where we should be.
No, treat them like the heroes and the essential workers you said they were. And that showing them how much you believe in them being heroes is what's in your paycheck, what's in your benefits, what's in the conditions that you work under. Not platitudes, not pats on the back, not shiny little badges for your shirt, but actual tangible things that you can take home to your family.
It's definitely time. We've been through a lot, as with any essential worker on the ground and in the air over the past few years. It's time to do this. And look, American Airlines is about to announce profits in 2 days on the 20th. It'll be interesting to see what those are, because we don't feel like we're sharing them in them right now. We've seen our profit sharing is paltry. The bonuses for the executives are rolling in. When is this going to end? It's time. We really should not even be talking about a strike authorization vote this evening.
No, and this is where I asked my next question, and you kind of rolled over it, was how profitable are they? I look at UPS. UPS made their revenue was over $100 billion. They pocketed almost $14 billion in pure profits after a couple billion in stock buybacks, and they want a cost neutral contract, which is just to be able to say that out loud is totally ludicrous. But I assume American is back to profitable. I'm assuming that they're rolling in and CEOs are doing well. How come that never seems to trickle down?
Americans return to profitability. We've seen it with the bonuses that management's received. We received our paltry 1.3% profit sharing, which was kind of a slap in the face after everything we've been through. They've returned to profitability. They're going to return to profitability even more on Thursday. And for the flight attendants and the other work groups at this airline and airlines across the country to just sit here and keep waiting, it's really unbelievable. Again, the economic proposal has been in their hands since the beginning of March. We're in July right now. It's time. So we have to move this process forward. We are going to continue with our federal mediators that have been assigned to the American Airlines flight attendants to keep this process moving forward. They met with our negotiating committee last week. They're meeting again next week. And we're really, really looking for some meaningful progress next week to bring this to a close. American Airlines just needs to step up to the plate. They know they need to do it, and they know they need to treat their employees well.
Is there a way for us to pressure, or is there a way, emails, calls, social media? I look at these greedy corporations that, they're making a lot of money. They just don't seem to want to share with the people who actually create the profits. That's the weird thing for me, Paul, that, it's the workers, it's the people on the ground who make that service go. You're a service industry. The people who are the ones who are dealing with your customers or taking care of your customers, those are the ones you should be taking care of.
It's really unfortunately not weird to me, because if you think back to what we had to do during COVID with the CARES Act to keep these airlines afloat, and how much money the government gave these airlines to stay afloat, you have to remember what that language said.
Yeah.
They actually had to write language in there saying this couldn't be used for stock buybacks. They had to actually put language in there saying this had to go to your employees only, to support your employees, to keep your employees connected, not only to their pay, but to their health benefits during a pandemic. So when you have to write language in there similar to that, those kind of things, to make sure the money is used properly, I'm not sure what that tells you. I guess everyone can come to their own assumptions, but this is what we're dealing with. You're absolutely right. These absolutely huge corporations, if you want to just make it about the airline industry, these mega carriers that have been allowed to merge over the past 20 years, and they need to share it with the frontline employees, not just the flight attendants. It's everybody. It's our ground staff. It's Airport Workers United, our friends over at SEIU. We just picketed with them the other day in Dallas and Phoenix, and it's just absolutely unbelievable what they're going through just to fight, to get a pay raise, to just make it through the month.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's across the board. It needs to change. We're just one piece of the puzzle, but strike authorization vote is opening July 28th. It's going to close on August 29th, and on the 30th, we'll announce the results and have our fourth system-wide picket. You did ask how the public can support us. We get support all the time on the plane, go flight attendants. We get support at our pickets. We get support through the media and our social media, and we're very grateful for that. I want to make sure that our flying passengers know we are very grateful that they returned. We're fighting for the return for staffing, so you receive better service on board the aircraft like you used to pre-COVID. So this is all about everyone, and we're all in this together.
You listen to the Rick Smith Show. We're here with Paul Hartshorn. He's the National Communications Chair for the Association of Professional Flight Attendants. They represent 26,000 workers, flight attendants at American Airlines. If you want to check out more on what they do, apfa.org, the website. We'll get links out on social media, how you can take a look at that. Now, you brought up, a couple of times you've brought up the fact that American and a lot of these airlines have been able to consolidate. We were told competition. Is this really the bigger issue in all of this, that these companies are so big that they pretty much feel that they have the power to do whatever they want, and government be damned? Because my fear is like the railroads. They know that no matter how pro-labor Joe Biden was, they were never going to be allowed to strike because it would have done such harm to our economy. Isn't this a moment where we look at the airlines and go, maybe they shouldn't be so big?
I always say what's done is done, and we have to deal with it now.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's an interesting question, because we receive that question a lot. Oh, would you ever be able to strike? Who's going to let 26,000 flight attendants walk out? There's intent in the Railway Labor Act, and we have negotiating attorneys. We have a bunch of unions, our sibling unions, pilots, flight attendants, ground workers, who are going to make sure that our rights that are contained in the Railway Labor Act aren't suffocated because of our size. That was never the deal, right? The deal for the Railway Labor Act is to protect the interstate commerce, to keep commerce moving, goods moving between states. And that's something they're going to have to come up with, because 26,000 flight attendants here, 27,000 flight attendants at another airline, 10,000 pilots in another airline are not just going to settle for rights being taken away that are included in the Railway Labor Act, period.
Well, I got to tell you, I'm there with you. I keep saying that anytime there's going to be a strike or even an informational picket, go out and adopt a striker, go out and double the size of the picket lines, because as I've always said, the bigger the pickets, the shorter the strike, and that's ultimately what we want. Before I let you go, I got another line of questioning I wanted to ask you about, because there's talk of reauthorizing the FAA, this Securing Growth and Robust Leadership in American Aviation Act, House Resolution 3935. Basically, it's just a reauthorization of the FAA. You guys got any position on this? Which way to go? A lot of my union friends say this has to be done. Where are you guys at?
Yeah, this has to be done by this fall. It has to be done by this fall. We have to fund the FAA. Our government affairs department at our union works closely with congressional representatives. We have people located in Washington, D.C. who do this every day on behalf of our union. We have our government affairs representatives working across unions, at airlines, at railroads, you name it, working with congressional representatives who support us and who do not necessarily support us, to try to make sure that we have certain things in that bill that we need to see, certain specific things that affect our safety, things that we've been trying to get through for years. One example would be the temperature in the cabin. There's no regulation for how hot it can be when we board these passengers. So it can be a company policy, but that needs to get into the FAA reauthorization bill. Things of that nature. That's just one example. But yeah, no, that has to be done this fall. We have people diligently working on it, like I said, at our union, working with other unions, and we hope to have more information on that soon. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, I know. One of the things that's interesting to me is, and I don't think most people know, that a lot of the maintenance, the mechanical work done on these aircraft are done overseas in places like El Salvador, I'm told, where you go, I don't know that I feel comfortable with that. I think I would prefer, I don't know, here, but yeah, I guess that's part of this as well.
Yeah, I think moving, I think a lot of that happened during the great, bankruptcies after 9/11, right? A lot was outsourced. I probably not just in airlines, probably across industries, right? But that's definitely a big. I won't speak too much about it. I'm not a mechanic. I appreciate their work, and I'm not sure exactly where they are on that. But yeah, that's all stuff that has to be included. We have a lot of interest when it comes, to the FAA reauth bill. And we're hoping to hear more on that soon. But we are definitely doing our work on Capitol Hill to try to make sure that our supporters in the Congress are, on board with that, and make sure they realize what is important to us, and more importantly, why it's important.
Important stuff. You do good work. Paul, I appreciate you taking time for us. I hope we don't get to a strike scenario. I hope this gets settled soon. But I wish you the best. And as this continues, I'd love to have you back to keep us up to date on what's going on.
Always appreciate everyone's support, and we will see everyone in the sky.
There you go. Thank you, Paul Hartshorn. He's the National Communications Chair for the Association of Professional Flight Attendants, apfa.org, their website, if you want to take a look at the work that they do. Going to take a quick break. Right back with your thoughts. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Have the talk.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So the folks over at the National Labor Relations Board Union, the NLRB union, they tweeted out a couple of tweets talking about Republicans wanting to slash the NLRB's budget by a third. They want to gut the NLRB's budget because, again, there's all of this activity of people wanting to join and form unions. The number of petitions, I think it jumped. What was the number? 58%. So the number of people going, hey, I want that, skyrocketing. So what do? You squeeze it off to where, we're going to push it further down the road, make it much more difficult for workers to get their rights and to vote. Now, Republicans do what Republicans do. It's about starving. Remember Grover Norquist? I want government so small I can drag it in the bathtub and drown it. Well, this is what Republicans in the House want to do to the NLRB. NLRB's got a ton of problems. 70 years of bad decisions, 70 years of Republican attacks and now going to starve what little budget it has. Yeah, again, for all my union brothers and sisters who vote for Republicans, this is what they do to you. So understand, if you need to go on strike, if you need to get something done, if you need to file an unfair labor practice, you need any of that stuff that they do that's so important, well, better luck next time. Because if they slashed and burned these budgets, well, you're not going to get anything. Now, our friends over at the Teamsters, this is an interesting story and something to watch of what's going to happen over the coming days. This is a big deal. Yellow Freight, which encompasses Holland, also, I guess, New Penn was part of this, the old Roadway, YRC, all of these companies that Yellow gobbled up. Evidently, Yellow has not made a pension contribution to the tune of about $50 million. And the union has said, hey, we're going to stop providing benefits to the workers on July 24th unless this is paid. And there could be a strike over this. Now, what's interesting is I know a little bit about the Yellow situation because I had worked for Roadway at one point. That Yellow, engaged in a hostile takeover and basically destroyed and put them out of business, as Yellow has been known to do throughout the decades. You give Yellow credit in corporate circles for destroying what was a solidly upper middle class, working class kind of wage job. This was a good job in the 80s and 90s. This was above a good job. This was a career. This was the kind of job that people got and never left. When I worked for Roadway, they used to tell their customers that they had a 1% turnover rate, that people came and stayed. They had the best qualified people who did the best job. And Yellow has always been a kind of a bottom feeder who, whatever they touch, somehow they destroy. So I'm not surprised that they're where they are. And the credit that they deserve is they have figured out how to take a job that was at the top of the working class and basically destroy it. To where now they've clawed back, years and years of pay raises. They've harmed their retirement security, and now the funding for the benefits, well, that's been stopped too. Now I see this as a ploy. To find out where the union goes. Now O'Brien's taken a big risk here by saying we're going to go on strike because there's the possibility of putting this company out of business. This is the kind of gamble. This is the kind of gamble that you're going to see. Does Yellow have the $50 million? And does the union, have they done the research to know whether they do or not? That's an interesting spot. So I'm waiting to see where this goes. Let's go to Kurt on line one. Kurt, how we doing? What's on your mind, brother?
Doing good, Rick.
Real quick, go.
Up here in Ukraine. So I wanted to talk about the airlines. My wife and I, we left Tucson last Saturday. From Tucson to D.C., and then from D.C. to France, and from France to Poland. So what we're not talking about with these airlines is my wife and I were both we're part of the clean air movement, and we have one of those RNet monitors that monitors the carbon dioxides in the air of the buildings, airplanes, etc. The U.S. airlines, all three, the two planes we were on in the U.S., they're such germ factories that we probably, all the people should have never been on there. The levels read at like 12.50 ppm of the carbons in the cabin.
And how bad is it on other airlines?
What's that?
How bad? I got 30 seconds. How bad is it on other airlines? We'll get to the point. Quick.
It's really bad. The levels dropped as you start to take off. And the European airlines, they all have the air monitors in the planes.
Right.
And I think that's something we're missing in our planes here. And I think it would be a lot for safety on airplanes.
All right. Well, this is something I will bring up to my friends at the Flight Attendants Union. I appreciate the time, Kurt. Got to quick break. Back after this.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1919. That Friday, thousands of workers in the Chicago stockyards walked off the job. A serious union organizing drive had been underway in the yards since June. One of the organizers of the butchers was John Kikulski. John declared it would be a campaign that included workers who were Polish, Irish, Lithuanian, and in fact, every race, color, creed, and nationality. This was an important pledge because earlier unionization efforts had failed to unite the workforce and had often excluded black workers. Yet the years of racial barriers to unionize proved hard to break down. While 90% of the white workers joined the union, black recruitment lagged behind. Tensions between the newly arriving Eastern European workers and more established white workers also simmered. Despite these setbacks, the stockyard owners were alarmed by the success of the union drive. They sent in 300 mounted policemen to disrupt union meetings and monitor the workers' movements. Angered at the police presence, 10,000 workers walked off the job. They returned to work on Monday, but began organizing for a strike. On July 26th, the workers issued their demands to management for better pay and safer working conditions. The next day would be one of the most infamous days in Chicago history. A group of white Chicagoans stoned and killed a black boy who was swimming and had accidentally drifted into a whites-only part of Lake Michigan. For the next week, a race riot engulfed the neighborhoods surrounding the stockyards. 1,000 black families lost their homes to arson. 23 black and 15 white residents were killed. Any hope of racial unity had been crushed, and as a result, the strike failed. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
All those firecrackers on July 4th got me thinking about the headline revolutionaries who signed the 1776 Declaration, fought the Brits for independence, hammered out the Constitution, and installed our Bill of Rights. Old Ben, Monticello Tom, General George, Alex, pamphleteer Tommy Payne, Jimmy and Dolly, Tea Party Sam, and others got America's democratic experiment started. And they're rightly saluted today from schoolrooms to political gatherings of both major parties as true patriots. Reflecting on that generation's remarkable impact reveals the historic potential of our people's democratic spirit. But it also raises the unavoidable contrast with our present crop of leading political characters. This is worth noting now because the 4th has become the opening bell for America's quadrennial presidential run. Yes, ready or not, the first debates are only a month away, and Iowa's Republican caucuses are set for January 15. So here's my question. Given the current state of our two major parties, would any of the patriots of 76 have a snowball's chance in hell of being nominated for president of the country they founded? Consider George Washington. The GOP's MAGA crowd would boo him off the stage. Trump would mock the general as Toothless George, and the party of QAnon, anti-woke nonsense, and Marjorie Taylor Greene would place him behind uber-rich ego trippers like Vivek Ramaswamy and Doug Burgum. Democrats? While today's grassroots Dems would rally enthusiastically to the little d democratic principles and firebrand activism of Thomas Paine or Samuel Adams, the party's pusillanimous corporate-hugging establishment would bury both in a muddy deluge of money and lies. This is Jim Hightower saying, this political reality shouldn't depress us, but provoke us into demanding and doing better. Maybe greatness is now beyond us, but shouldn't we strive for more than mediocrity and outright goofiness?
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So it's about time. It's about time someone finally charges the fake electors. And I look today, Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel. And you remember we had Dana Nessel on the program back during the Working Class Heroes radio tour back in October of last year. But she's charged 16 pro-Trumpers, the fake electors, for their involvement in the scheme to overturn the 2020 election. And I looked at some of the charges, and I'm going, okay, 1 count of conspiracy to commit forgery, get that. 2 counts of forgery, okay. 1 count of conspiracy to commit uttering and publishing. 1 count of uttering and publishing. I don't know what that is. Sounds bad, though. 1 count of conspiracy to commit election law forgery, and 2 counts of election law forgery. I'm going to be interested to see how this plays out, and here to share some thoughts on one, why it took so long to get here, and 2, what is uttering and publishing, and what that will get you. And that's why I've asked our good friend Bob Ney to come share some thoughts, former Ohio congressman and political analyst, genius extraordinaire when it comes to the political world. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you, Rick.
So, uttering and publishing.
Well, on this one, you need F. Lee Bailey, because I have no idea what the uttering and publishing would be, except if you make a false statement, I think, and if you would publish something that is also false. You publish a document, for example, and your intent is to defraud. That's what I think that is.
Yeah, what the
I'm
Googles
not a
tell
lawyer,
me.
But they have published something with an intention to, become electors. It was fraudulent. So I think that's the publishing.
Yeah,
and
the
probably
Googles tell
uttering
me,
is an old word they use with it.
Right. The Googles tell me in Michigan, uttering and publishing is defined as a willful uttering or publishing a written or printed statement that is false with the intent to injure or defraud. Yeah. This crime is punishable up to 14 years. Wow.
Yeah,
I knew it sounded
I figured
bad.
The publishing was something they put in writing, and they intended to, be fraudulent with it.
Wow. So I come back to this, and why is this taking so long? I mean, if you or I would have done something, the next day, I've argued, why weren't these people arrested the day it landed on the desk, where you go, no, this isn't it. This isn't the one that, no, you're this is where my mind is. How would come people weren't in bracelets the day it was landed on the desk and presented as authentic?
Well, I think 2 things. I'm just going to be, totally in conjecture here. I'm not going to be anything with a sound basis to it. But I think, number 1, in today's complicated legal world, everything tends to take a long time to dot every I and cross every T. And I think, secondly, due to the nature of this issue, being that with Trump, the presidential election, the fact that, they had to hone in on multiple states doing things. Of course, some of these were more out front than others. So I think that's the second factor in it, that they want to make sure, and due to the situation, this is rather unique. So I think that's probably the reason that, it took so long. Now, on other things, I would think there's a different explanation. For example, we know that Trump's had a target letter, and that's come from Smith. And one would look at that, and I would at least, and say, okay, did Smith find new information, maybe emails we didn't know about, maybe correspondence from officials in the White House in regard to January 6th we didn't know about and Trump's involvement? Or I think another potential answer to this is that it didn't happen through the Attorney General's office because it just wasn't going to. It's going to take a special prosecutor, and the Department of Justice just wasn't going to do anything against the former president. I think that's a potential answer also on that.
So what do you make of the target letter? Are you surprised that Trump is the target of an investigation on January 6th? Is there any surprise in that?
I'm not surprised. Again, I think there needs to probably be new information that we don't know about. And the reason I say there needs to be, you just sit here and say, why wasn't the Department of Justice capable enough last year, last month, 4 months ago, 5 months ago, to come up with, the same type of conclusion of whatever Smith is coming up with if he's made Trump a target of the investigation? There's a couple answers for that. One, the Department of Justice just wasn't going to go there, which happens. Or, number two, there's new information that we just don't know about that Smith has dug up, and that's another potential answer for that.
See, my thought on this goes along this route of they didn't want to do anything. Nobody wanted to do anything. Nobody in the Justice Department wanted any part of this. And as we found out about the documents and it taking a year for them to go get them, that nobody wanted to get their hands dirty in this. Nobody wanted to get into the middle of it. They wanted to let sleeping dogs lie, and they dealt with Trump with kid gloves. This is one of those things where there's part of me that goes, finally, now that the door has been open, you're getting all of this stuff now coming around. And did you see the story about the kid from Massachusetts who's now saying, hey, you treated that guy who used to be president, you treated him special. You should be treating us special. Evidently lawyers for the Air National Guardsman who's charged with leaking documents is saying, hey, he should be afforded the same pretrial privileges as Donald Trump got, which I find interesting.
Right. Well, I was thinking that, myself the other day, I didn't know about the article, but I was just thinking about, if I was the lawyers for that guy, I would obviously try to make some type of correlation with this. But I think your answer is correct about justice, and that's what I was just saying a minute ago about Smith and the Department of Justice, why they didn't do something before. One of the reasons I predicted that this wouldn't happen is because at the time I looked at the fact that DOJ, in my mind, just looking everything over, wasn't going to act on this. And I think on that end of it, I was correct. I didn't anticipate a special prosecutor that would particularly act on it. Because you do have to go back to the fact if Smith can act on this, why couldn't justice act before? And I just don't think the will was there. Beating a dead horse, by the way, nobody, no administration, no political party ever went back and got all the people that lied to us when I was sitting there listening to them on Iraq with all the other members.
And of course, this is where I then wanted to go. I mean, if we're going back in the past and we're righting wrongs,
right?
Can we please? Because I'm dying for you to tell me. You know this, don't you?
Now, all I know is if we maybe pick a middle spot somewhere out in the country and I whisper it, they probably still will hear it. Let me put it that way.
And I would never put you in that position. But at some point, legally, if we're going to be going after this stuff, we should be going after all of it as well.
Yeah, well, I did this for quite a few years on your show when I would talk about the fact that they need to release the 911 information. Yeah. They need to release it. I kept saying they need to release it because in there it mentions the Saudi embassies. And, of course, then, we looked at that. Well, who believes that? That needs to be further looked at, of what the Justice Department did looking into the connections of the Saudis.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're here with former Ohio Congressman and political analyst Bob Ney. I want to get your thoughts on Vivek Ramaswamy because he's from your neck of the woods.
Yes.
Evidently, over the weekend, he was at the Turning Points USA conference where he said that, hey, January 6th, that's just a friendly preview of what's to come if basically they don't get their way. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I think what he's saying, obviously, is if they don't get their way, then it's going to cause people to be once again, uprising and in arms. He's also, I think he has said he would pardon Trump, has he not?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, he said that. Now, I do want to mention this about Vivek Ramaswamy. He did say something that was kind of interesting about his donors, the ones that he's signing up. He actually does sign them up as fundraisers, but his point is all these big money people pay these consultants big money. They get to keep a percentage. Why not people? It was just, I thought, actually a pretty interesting, answer that he gave.
No, it's gig work. We're turning people into gig workers for political campaigns.
Yeah, you're right. But yeah, if I don't know, if these candidates today, I think they ought to stay away from if I don't win or else this happens. I mean, I just think that, try to stay away from that. Let's just have elections again instead of marches.
Yeah. Now, today in the
buildings.
House, I believe Democrats have reintroduced the Freedom to Vote Act. Any thoughts on the Freedom to Vote Act?
Well, the Republicans have a bill. I can't even remember what they're calling it, to be frank with you. And I just hope they don't, mess up the system. I hope they don't try to do, well, it won't pass the Senate, but even for the looks of it, I would hope that they would try to stay towards, reformation of the system and make it easier to vote than harder to vote. Of course, anything that the Democrats are going to introduce on this topic is not going to go anywhere.
Yeah, it's dead on arrival.
But you still need to do it. Still need to introduce it. Still need to push it and promote the idea out there. Republicans aren't going to pass anything through the Senate. So.
No, but back to Vivek Ramaswamy, he also said that Supreme Court justices that he would appoint, Ted Cruz and Bill Lee from Utah, interesting choices. Interesting choice, crazy, but interesting choices.
Maybe Mitch McConnell asked him to get him out of the Senate. Did you ever think about that? You never know.
Yeah, no, look,
Ramaswamy wants to take the court. It's not right enough for you. He wants to take it further to the right.
Yeah, interesting. We're in an interesting moment because I'm starting to see some of because I'm starting to come around to your thought because where my mind is Trump is the inevitable candidate in 2024. But now I'm starting to see some undercurrents, like Wilbur Ross, former Commerce Secretary, doing some rounding of donors for Youngkin, the governor of Virginia. There's a super PAC going to spend $40 million on Tim Scott. There seems to be some undercurrents that the moneyed people think that Trump may not be the guy. So I don't know. Maybe I'm not there yet, but I'm rethinking the possibility that Trump may not be the guy in 24.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I first thought this again, not just this past February, but even a year before. Just trying to look at the tea leaves and anticipating some legal problems, especially from New York or particularly Georgia. And I didn't even know about the possibility of a special prosecutor. I don't think this is the last case. He's going to have to find a creative reason. Why he's not going to run, because if he stays in the convention, he's going to win the convention.
Right.
I don't care, if he's in prison khakis, he's going to win the convention. But I just don't think it's going to get there.
Yeah, see, I don't. And this is where I had a bunch of people while he was president saying he's going to resign. And I'm going, there's just no way in a cold day in Hades that he's going to resign. His ego is never going to allow him to do it. And this is where my mind is in this moment. He's the front runner. He's out ahead. I just don't know that his ego is gonna let that happen.
Well, my mind goes towards the ego and the fact that somewhere along the line, the pollsters are going to show him enough doubt, not of the primary, but of the general election.
Yeah.
And they may even show him the possibility maybe it's not Biden running and what would happen to his particular numbers.
You think it's possible Biden's not going to be the guy?
In today's world, when I first started in radio, as you know, you really had to kind of work to find stories. And now the moments of the weird pop up every hour. And I've just never seen anything happen like this since since 2016 in this country, and I think anything is particularly possible anymore.
Yeah.
That numbers may get worse. There might be two candidates that may not run. I'm not making that prediction, but it's possible.
Yeah, no, I think it's possible. Look,
and if it's not Biden, because Biden's numbers are weak. Anybody that doesn't want to recognize that's going to help him lose the election. But I will say this: if it's not Biden, I think Trump is complete toast. If it's Biden, I don't know where I'd bet on that election.
Yeah, see, I think Trump's the only one Biden wins with. That's where my mind goes, because everyone's in their camp. But
Right.
look, you've got this third way group. There's no labels group. You've got these folks. Maybe Manchin. I think Manchin is going to announce he's going to run for re-election and run against Jim Justice, and I think he'll probably lose. I don't think he's going to run for president, but he's teasing it out that he may be the no labels candidate. Any thoughts on that?
Well, he is. He's teasing it out. I think I'm with you. I think he'll run for the Senate for one more try. You never can count Manchin out in that state. But as far as the new independent group, Joe Lieberman and the whole group, they could be kingmakers this time. Usually, you look at groups and say, since Ross Perot, they're not that effective. In this election, if it's particularly Trump versus Biden, at the end, yes, they could be kingmakers.
Well, another instance of Joe Lieberman harming the country, at least. That's my thought.
Joe Lieberman's greatest harm, I love to never let this one go, is the fact that he took the ACA, Obamacare, and he gutted out, the provision on behalf of all the insurance clients, in Connecticut. And there was that stopgap measure that would have taken care of a lot of people. They could have bought into Medicare early.
I know.
He gutted that one out.
And you wonder why I called him Trader Joe.
Yeah, that was a significant piece of legislation that really, it was in the original package from President Obama.
Thanks, Joe. Again, I won't forget that either. But we'll see. We'll see where this goes. But as always, Bob, I appreciate the thoughts, the insight. Good stuff.
And let's not do any publishing or uttering today.
No uttering.
Because they won't take 2 years to get us. Trust me.
Oh, boy, you're right on that. Thanks, Bob. Appreciate it. No, he's look. I'm still good on Dana Nessel. I love her. I think she's fantastic. She is a no nonsense. Take him to the rack kind of person. I'm surprised it took this long. Want to hear your thoughts, though? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. We'll take a quick break. Right back to wrap things up. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute. Back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. I want to get a couple emails before we wrap things up. Donna sent me an email saying, "Who's the fool you had on? Why didn't you ask what he would do with people who commit crimes, if not prison? Maybe they can live with both of you. What an idiot he is. That's why we have all this crime in so many states." And sent me a link to a Cleveland.com article. And she's talking about the guy who, and you may remember the other day on the program, we had a guy running for prosecutor in Cleveland. And the point that I took from the interview that I thought was most important was the idea of prosecuting power over desperation. When you talk about people who are acting in a desperate fashion, we come down with a hammer. You stole those 3 peppermint patties, 500 days in jail before your trial. But if you steal from, your workers and you cheat them out of millions of dollars, well, a slap on the wrist, promise not to do it again until you get caught the next time. And I understood his point. This point was very, very clear that we're going to go after power. I did ask him, well, what do you do with criminals? And he did say, duh, we're gonna hold them accountable. We're not going to use the death penalty. I'm not a death penalty person, but he didn't say they were going to let them go. At no point did he say he was going to be weak on crime. He did, however, say that there are other things that you can do than locking people up. Like we used to back in the old days. When older than me, I think of my uncle's generation. A lot of them would get into trouble at 18, 19 years old, and you know where they ended up? Not jail. They ended up going to the military. And that straightened them out. There were alternative sentences that were given because we didn't have a for-profit prison industry back then. Now we've got for-profit prisons. Everybody's got to go to prison because we got to get the heads in beds because these for-profit prison companies have 85, 90% occupancy riders in their contracts. Whether we're locking people up or not, we're paying for it, so we might as well. So, Donna, nobody's saying be weak on crime. But we're saying maybe, I don't know, maybe do things a little bit differently. Maybe, I don't know, deal with the root causes of poverty that cause a lot of this crime. Maybe just something of that. But then to really use the hammer and go after the powerful, the ones who have been getting away with, everything they can grab. Think about the collapse in 2008. How many of those Wall Street criminals were indicted? How many people went to jail? How many people spent a day in jail? So for me, that interview, pretty simple. That interview for me, is one of those things that you just go, it's finally something that I think is important. So that's kind of where my mind goes on this thing. Also, want to get into another email real quick, and this is one of those situations where you just, it's. This is one of those things where you just go, I have my thoughts on it, and every time we talk about the trans issue, people immediately come to you're disfiguring children. And again, the extreme view of this. I've said from the beginning, I don't want government making choices that are difficult for families. I don't want to have these kind of very personal things put into a religious zealot frame. And look, I don't know how I would respond if my children were going down the path. We would go through the doctors and things like this as well, like everyone does. What I know on the trans issue is kids who are in that world, the suicide rate is just through the roof. And the idea of moving towards gender affirming care, whatever that may be, for people under 18, and as I understand it, and it has been explained to me by people who know a lot more about this than I do, there are no surgeries for those kids. They don't do that. It's a long path to get to that. Even as an adult, it's a couple-year process. It's not something that you can do in a drive-through fashion, which is what the Q folks and the right would want us to believe, that it's on demand. It's not. This is a long, painful, difficult process. One that I don't feel comfortable having government that tells us that they have a religious view of this stuff. Do I understand it? No. And I'll tell you what I've told every person that I know who's gone through the transition and has done this. I don't understand it. I'm never going to understand it, but I wish you the best. I hope this brings you happiness. I hope this is the decision that you've made that'll make you happy. Now, as Jim has emailed me, well, there are people out there who regret this. Of course there are. There always are. But that doesn't mean that you cut it off for everyone, because ultimately, for too many of these kids, it's life-saving to be able to move in that direction. And I got to tell you, this is a growth moment for me as well. The ability to say, look, some people aren't who they want to be. And maybe we should allow them to pursue their happiness. And this is where you hope that families and parents they're the ones who are guiding. So, Jim, I'm not with you on the hard iron hand of the law, but I appreciate the email. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Miss any of the program? Grab the podcast. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.